Welcome back to another industry report. Today we have got a fairly major story. We do have the confirmation of the Series S, but I think perhaps more importantly, we have got seemingly, I would say, pretty accurate rumors of what's going to come next in the form of, basically something that Sony cannot compete with, and something that basically is just such a good deal that it's honestly rather bonkers. Let's kick it off with the Series S reveal. So, after Thurrott leaked an image that showed the console and the price late yesterday, the official Xbox Twitter account basically was just forced to make it official. So the Xbox Series S is said to be next-gen performance in the smallest Xbox ever, and it's going to retail for $299, £250 in the UK. So that's about the same price as a Nintendo Switch, but it's a full next-gen console, which seems really quite good. Now, there's nothing officially available on the specs here, but it's basically something that every insider has been saying, for all of this year. So from what we understand from them, it's basically all like next-gen components and architectures, but without a disk drive and a GPU that is drastically weaker. Apparently 4 teraflops versus the Xbox One X's 6 and the Series X's 12. But bear in mind, teraflops really does not mean a whole lot, especially when you are moving upwards in GPU architecture, so you should bear that in mind. Now, what this realistically does mean, though, is, reduced resolution, visual quality, and frame rate, but most importantly, you still are going to get, the quality of life improvements and the sort of platform features of basically the Project Scarlet, next-gen sort of Xbox sort of situation. Now, according to the reveal trailer, which it was leaked shortly after the announcement, it's only got a 512 gig SSD. This is not particularly good, so that means, today, you can install a handful of AAA games. I mean, if you're a Call of Duty player, you've got Warzone, Black Ops, and maybe 1 or 2 more games if you are lucky. Now, that said, there could be expandable storage. There is in the Series X, so maybe that will happen here as well. But I do feel that 512 is where you're actually going to be just feeling the budget hit. And I think as well, for the people who don't have fast internet, having to re-download a 100 gig game after you've deleted it to save space is going to suck. And the thing is, yes, you could get external storage in the form of an external SSD, but is that going to be able to make use of what they call the Xbox Velocity architecture, right? Which is essentially just whatever proprietary stuff they're doing with the it's the NVMe SSD that is, that's inside the actual console itself. So hard to know exactly what's going there, but at least on that 500 gig primary SSD, you're going to still get the super fast loading times, and also they did say DirectX ray tracing, and basically just, your next gen feature set, it's going to be there. It's just not going to be as good as it's could be on, of course, the Series X. Now, the trailer itself says that it's a 1440p console and that it has frame rates up to 120 FPS, but you gotta remember, that's a statement of what the console supports. It can output 1440p and 120 FPS. Do not expect that from every single game, but it is at least nice to see that, that's actually being talked about as a focus. Now, you might think that this console being leaked, being leaked in a way that Microsoft then actually had to comment on it, you might think that's the big story of today. I disagree. I actually think there's a larger story here, and that's the thing we're going to get into. Now, before we do that, 250k, that is the subs that we are trying to drive towards, and most of the people who watch this channel are not subscribed to the channel because of how YouTube and the algorithm and the homepage and all that works. So, hit that sub button, it really is appreciated, and with that said, let's get into Xbox's big strategy and, the big leak. So, over in Windows Central, they are claiming that the Series X is going to be $500 with both of the consoles set to launch on the 10th of November. Now, if that's true, then it is entirely expected. It's just nice to see some more info there. But more importantly, what they suggest is, the way you can actually access these consoles very cheap up front. The Series S will be a part, they say, of Xbox's all-access program at $25 a month. Now, that is basically Game Pass Ultimate, Xbox Live, and of course the console. and it's just $25 a month. And it basically means somebody could get everything next gen right the hell now for a $25 upfront cost. And as soon as they get that, they'll have the entire Game Pass library. And it's hard to overstate just how much game you get for your dollar or your pound or whatever you're using when you are going with Game Pass, right? It's a stupidly good deal. So you could cancel 1 or 2 subscription services, or you could just, not pay all of the money up front, and there you go. You're into the next gen right away, very cheap. I mean, it's so cheap that the maths sometimes doesn't even add up, because apparently it's $25 a month for 2 years. And it then includes the $15 Game Pass Ultimate. And that does mean that you're paying $10 a month for the console, which is $240 over 2 years. Now, $240, of course, is less than the $299 upfront cost, and that really does just show that it's a recurring revenue bundle. That is what Microsoft want, because they know that if you get the console via that mechanism, what's going to happen? You're going to get Game Pass afterwards, you're going to stick around. And before I talk about how selling consoles isn't actually the business of selling consoles, we need to talk about the Series X, because apparently it's going to be on that same scheme for $35 a month. Now, that's a bit more steep as a monthly cost, but still, for getting that console and all that you get with that, it is legitimately a pretty damn good deal. It's quite wild. You can just get whatever you want from Xbox without much upfront cost if this leak does prove to be true. And I suppose with this, we do have a pretty crystallized lineup, right? And we sort of know what Xbox's plan is. It's just to get a device in the home of everybody who conceivably wants one, and then to just ensure that everybody is just paying for Game Pass. And ultimately, that's where the money's going to come from. Because you got to remember that it's not about selling consoles. Now, it is about selling consoles in that consoles are what build your platform, but that's actually the point. The real thing for these companies is building the platform. It's not a situation for Xbox and Sony where they're like Apple, right? Where Apple actually sell their phones at a profit. Almost all the time, these big consoles are sold at a loss. Now, that means that it's just about getting as many as you possibly can into people's hands, because where the money is actually made here is on peripherals. It's on things like Game Pass. It's on, that 70-30 split that's going to be on the platform store. So you could really see that this is how Microsoft are attempting to compete with Sony. And again, I would say, if you're watching this, are you a parent with young kids? Maybe not, I'm not sure, but you've got to think about somebody. Let's just say they're in their 40s, maybe they're maybe in their 40s or something. They're not they're not watching channels like this, right? They've got a busy life. All they really know is there's a new thing coming out and it's Christmas and they need to get their kids something. What are they going to see? Well, if it is the case that they see $25 a month and then they see actually, oh, this would also mean that there's a whole bunch of games that come with it, I think you can see how that is something that for a large segment of that market is going to be extremely attractive. And then, of course, for, those of us who want the big fancy graphics, the Series X is there. Yes, $500 of that is true. That is a bit more steep, but it also does seem like in terms of power, it really is going to be quite a beast of a machine. And who knows, maybe they'll even ship a few months of Game Pass with it or something like that. And then, of course, for those of us over in PC, well, the thing is that because Microsoft have moved away from purely building a console platform to building a platform that is very much cross-medium, well, we actually benefit from this new way that Microsoft are doing things, because, yes, you could sell somebody a Series S or a Series X, or you could just get Game Pass on their PC. Because if you think about this, my PC, I built that myself. Microsoft didn't have to sell me my computer as a loss leader. So if they could then sell me games in that PC, in some ways, that's even better for revenue than it would be if I was buying their stuff on a console. But then even for PC, you've got to remember, a lot of people do not have big beefy rigs, right? They've got rigs that are, they're playing League, they're playing Counter-Strike, but they're not really able to play big new AAA games. So even for those people, right, if you can get a 1440p console for the price of a budget graphics card, I mean, that's also something we should talk about too. That is a pretty damn good deal. And then also we've got to remember, not everybody's got a 4K TV, right? So for those people, like the Xbox Series X, does that even make that much sense in the here and now, and they can actually use one of its bigger features? And I'd also say that given the economic uncertainty of this year, the Series S could actually satisfy people with that feel of next gen, because they will get a lot of the next gen features and user experience, but they can do that for a lot less money. And I think that could be a really strong play as we kind of, just move into whatever sort of phase of the world and the economy that we're moving into. And maybe that's something where Microsoft are actually better positioned than Sony. I would actually say that they probably are. And what that really leads us on to is the state of the console war. So, look, this situation with All Access and the cheaper console, it does not make up for Microsoft's weaknesses. They're completely missing any sort of compelling experience to actually shift people across because of Halo's delay, right? And, they sort of upgrade the games over time kind of game schedule where they really are focusing on, value and access and things like that. Whereas on the PS5, they're just saying, hey, Ratchet and Clank, Spider-Man, you get them in the PS5, that's it. Tough luck. That's the only place you can get them. And for a lot of people, as we've seen with even this current gen, that's going to be extremely successful. I think the main difference here is that where Microsoft struggled to compete, they now do have an angle to compete. It's not the angle of having the exclusives, but it is another angle. So I think that would be pretty major for them. And maybe it's actually the situation that what they want is to be that big third-party console, right? Where you can get into it pretty cheap. You've got Game Pass for a bunch of value. And hey, if you're playing like Call of Duty and Destiny, well, hey, you're fine anyway. You don't care about the exclusives. So I suppose that's kind of just the way that they're actually doing things. And I think what's going to be interesting here is that we frame the console wars like who gets the most sales and all of that, but when you actually think about the sort of business behind it, you can see that there's sort of two different markets that are being pursued here. And I do have to wonder what the actual console sales figures are going to look like should we get them in 6 months, in a year. Will it actually be a case where there is room enough for both of them? Kind of hard to tell. Now, Sony, for this launch, right, they've got no way to compete with the Series S. Yes, there is the all-digital version of the PS5, but it still is a good bit more premium than the Series S. And also, of course, the Access subscription plan and things like Game Pass, right? And yes, there's PS Now and stuff like that, but generally they're weaker in that regard than Microsoft is. But then, of course, Xbox has got no way to compete with PS5's first-party lineup. They actually are coming out of the gate with an extremely, probably great consoles and an extremely strong, unique selling point. And it is just that. They have different unique selling points. And I think that's just going to make this one of the most interesting just sort of periods of consoles that we've had in a bit, to be honest with you. And as I said, selling consoles is not the business. Building a profitable platform is. And perhaps Microsoft are especially well set up in that particular regard. And while we may be talking about how they're going for slightly separate segments of the market and things like that in terms of price point economics, you've also got to remember they are fighting for the same marketing and PR space, and that is limited. So yeah, while this leak was unfortunate, I think that it's obvious that this reveal was a knee-jerk-ish thing, but I do think it worked out. People are talking about this, and I think generally in a positive light. But, of course, we hear that the PS5 announcement is going to be tomorrow, that there will be something. Now, that's according to Game, who are a UK retailer. They did that in a tweet, and then they deleted it pretty quickly. So, because of that, I'm guessing that it was accurate, and they had to pull it down. So, there you go. You would have thought this was just a random week in September, but it does seem like we're actually getting a lot of the missing details, and I imagine the pre-orders will be going live soon enough. I think it's an interesting situation. I'd like to know, what do you think about the price point? Do you think that Microsoft, by being so accessible with the lower entry price and of course the Access subscription, do you think that can compete basically with Spider-Man and Ratchet and Clank? To be honest, I'm not that sure. With where I am, I already have a PC, so I'm going to have to get a PS5 so I can get Spider-Man and Ratchet and Clank, especially Ratchet for me. But that said, are Microsoft even going to be sad in that case? Because I'm probably also going to have Game Pass, and I'm almost definitely going to buy Halo Infinite on my PC. So I guess it's a bit of a win-win for both of them if you happen to be a PC gamer. An interesting situation. Do let me know what you think, and of course, be sure to hit that sub button, be sure to hit that like button, and with that said, I will see you next time.